Someone else need a copy?
I wasn't here.
Okay, so go, do it quick, because I'm waiting for you,
But I can also just listen on that. That's fine.
as you wish.
Hmm?
As you wish. Okay,
Princess Unit.
okay. So let's go. I don't know if we're gonna finish today, but we should finish today.
Are we on the last
You need a copy?
Yeah.
Oh, so you have to go down to do not on the last page, no. We're on page 140,
No, don't worry.
141, really. We still have a lot to learn of the Sikha. You don't know Yiddish. You don't know Yiddish. Okay, so let's do it.
Don't worry. I got it.
I don't worry. Listen, worrying is a mitzvah. If you're Jewish and you don't worry, just reflection on your Jewishness. You know that? Okay, let's go. Let's go. Says, hey, Adar, right? Hey, Adar.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is the 36th yard site of the Rebbe's brother-in-law. Rebbe had a brother-in-law married to the Frierdiker of his older daughter. His name was Rabbi Gerari, Shmayo Gerari, Samarius Gerari, the Rashad he would call. He was a member of the Gerari family. The Gerari family was a very prominent Chabad mishpacha. They were extremely wealthy people, but they were also uncompromised Hasidim, meaning they were not just dedicated to the Rebbe, they were extremely frum, and they were very, very into learning Hasidus. He died Vav Adar. Tomorrow was Vav Teis Hey. I'm saying this because I'm setting up the machine, so it's an opportunity to talk a little gossip. He married the oldest daughter of the previous Rebbe. The engagement was made when his father, the previous Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rashab, was still alive, and it was his suggestion that they should take him, Shmerel, as he was called, Shmayo Gerari, for the daughter of the oldest daughter of the previous Rebbe. Her name is Chana. And so one of the conditions of the marriage was, listen to this, one of the conditions of the marriage was to marry a daughter of the Rebbe, you had to know by heart 500 Maimonim of Chassidus. Do you know how much that is? 500 Maimonim. The Samach Vav is 61 Maimonim. The Ayin Beis is 144 Maimonim. So what 500 Maimonim means? It's like almost half of all Maimonim are Rebbe Rashab. It's so much. It is so much. It's unimaginable how much it is. It's huge. So this Rabbi Gerari was a very smart man. And he knew a lot of Chassidus to such an extent that part of the reason he was chosen to be a son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe was because he was so immersed in Chassidus that he was pushed unaware of the world. He came from a very rich home. His parents were very wealthy people, very balabatish, very successful people. But he learned in yeshiva in Lubavitch, and he was so immersed in Chassidus that he pushed didn't know what was going on. He was above tightness, he was above weakness, above temptation, above lust. He was in another world. And he married the previous Rebbe's oldest daughter. And but there were other conditions. There were two other conditions. Another condition was that he has to stay up a whole Friday night. Every Friday night, he's not allowed to sleep. Friday night, he has to stay up all night and learn. And the third condition is that he won't use any implants in his mouth for his teeth. No dentures and none of those things. The previous Rebbe I heard had 5 sets of dentures, like Fleischiks and Milchiks and Pariv, and for Pesach he had Fleischiks and Pariv. He didn't have the condition was the sons are not going to have any dentures. So years later, he once told one of the Bachrim, the Rebbe was younger than him. The Rebbe was the second son-in-law. The Rebbe became the Rebbe. He wasn't the Rebbe. I mean, you don't get the job because you're in a senior position. You have to be qualified to have the job. The Rebbe that I knew had no teeth. When you watch the Rebbe speaking, and he sounds normal, with a slight lisp, the Rebbe didn't have a single tooth in his mouth. It is physically impossible for a person to talk without teeth. Now, most people don't have teeth, their face sinks, they look like a prune. If you know anybody who wears dentures, when they take the dentures out, they look funny. They look like a prune, the face becomes very, very round. The Rebbe kept his jaw ajar artificially. You know what that means? For 30 years. My father remembers the Rebbe's teeth falling out one by one. When the Rebbe became a Rebbe, he still had teeth. But I remember the last tooth. This was the last tooth, the left incisor right here, the last tooth, not the incisor, what's it called? I forgot what these teeth are called in the front, they have a name, I don't remember it. Incisor is a scissor, it's a different kind of tooth, not everybody has incisors. It's called, what are these teeth called? It doesn't matter. I remember the last tooth falling out, he didn't have a single tooth in his mouth. And he spoke almost perfectly clearly without any teeth. And when you watched the Rebbe eat, you saw that he had no teeth. He was chewing with his gums. So the Rashag, his brother-in-law, came to the Rebbe and he said, I can't live like this. The Rebbe let him put in dentures. But every Friday night, he'd stay up all night and he'd learn. And in the 70 years, my father was in yeshiva. Friday night, Rabbi Rashag, his brother, would come downstairs on the second floor and he would sit in the Beis HaMedrash in the shul and he would learn all night. And the Baruch would go over and talk to him, and he would talk to the Bachurim. And my father told me he was easy to talk to, and he answered questions. He understood Chassidus. He was easy to engage with, the Rashag. And the third condition, I heard that he once told the Bachur, he was traveling someplace, and I don't know what the Bachur said, but it was not so respectful. So the Rashag answered him, but the 500 Maimonic Chassidus that I know by heart, you can't take away from me. 500 Maimonic Chassidus was a condition of the engagement. 500 Maimonic Chassidus. Rashag. Tomorrow is his yahrzeit, so we're going to mention him. His name is Shmayo ben Menachem Mendel. He got shlishi every Shabbos. When the Rebbe's minyan, he got shlishi every single Shabbos, because the previous Rebbe bought aliyahs for his children. The previous Rebbe in Europe and then in America bought aliyahs for himself. He bought maftir. For the Rashag, he bought shlishi. For our Rebbe, he bought shishi. But on a Yom Tov, when there's no 6 aliyahs, the Rebbe got chamishi. The third son-in-law was a kohen, so he got kohen. So the Rashag actually, when I was growing up, every Shabbat, Yamoid, Rabbi Shmayo, Rabbi Mendel, Shlishi was built. It was automatic. In other words, even if there were a lot of chasanim and there was a lot of nigim aliyahs, the Rashag never gave his aliyah. It was a cover that he had from the Fili to get him, and he kept it. And he became over time a very big chassid of the Rebbe's. That's worth mentioning. Go ahead.
Well, why have a rule about the requirement not to get dentures?
What was the reason for
Yeah.
it? There's halachic reasons for denture. Because teeth that the Eibishter gave you are part of your body. So when you eat fleischiks, and then 6 hours later you eat milchiks, and the food that you ate was hot, we don't worry about the fact that the time of the fleischiks in your teeth is going to come out of your teeth and mix with the time of the milchiks in your mouth, and you're going to eat milk, meat and milk together. Because the Eibishter gave you the teeth, and the Eibishter knows what he's doing, and that's the end of that. Okay? And you, of course, wait between milk and meat. You have to wait an hour, according to our custom. Between meat and milk, you wait 6 hours. This is the reason. You don't want reflux. You don't want to mix the taste of the meat and the taste of the milk. But when you put anything artificial in your mouth, you have to worry about giving out taste. The halacha is when a pot is treif. What makes a pot treif? That it absorbed tam of isser, right? If the pot is perfectly clean, especially if you waited 24 hours when it's really decent time of gam, you don't really need the kasher. The whole kasher is a chumrah. But the reason you're making it kosher is because there's a taste, not a mamashas. There's no actual isser. The taste of milk went into the walls of the pot, and when you cook meat in it, the taste of the milk is going to come out of the walls of the pot and meet with the milk. And if there's going to give taste, which is very unlikely, but if taste from the milk is going to give a flavor to the meat, that meat is treif. It's not treif because you have actual milk and meat, but you have the taste of milk and meat. So that's where you have to kasher. So if you have dentures and you ate fleischiks, the fleischiks were hot, did the dentures absorb the meat? I mean, the same is true for fillings, which are made, where fillings are made out of. When you have fillings in your mouth, and you ate food, and that was very hot, and you absorb. Now, you don't wait 24 hours. You wait 24 hours between eating milk and meat wouldn't be so terrible, but nobody does. The 24 hours go listen down, the taste is considered wasted, not good. But if you eat milk 6-7 hours later, the milk is also hot. So maybe the heat of the milk warmed up your teeth and extracted the taste from the meat, and it mixes together and it's out of teifus. The Rebbe Rashab would not fill his teeth. The Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe would not fill his teeth. The Rebbetzin of the Rebbe Rashab asked a rabbi who the Rebbe Rashab had respect for, to mention to her husband the idea of filling his teeth, because he suffered with toothaches that were unimaginable, because his teeth were corroded. He didn't pull them, and he wouldn't fill them. He was in agony, unbelievable pain, agony. So this Rav, his name is Rav Seifer, came to the Rebbe Rashab and he apologized. But he said that your wife asked me to talk to you about it, and he explained to him how there's no real problem. Why? Because the food is so hot that it can cook. You can't put it in your mouth. And when you put it in your mouth, it's not so hot. If it's not so hot, it doesn't put taste into the walls of the pot, and it doesn't extract taste from the walls of the pot. It has to be hot enough for the taste to go in and come out. So he told the Rebbe Rashab, it's a chashush, it's a very, very far concern that there should be a problem with using the fillings in your mouth with the milchiks and fleischiks, because if the food can go into your mouth, it's probably not hot enough for it to do any cooking. And the Rebbe Rashab answered him, but every time I put food in my mouth, I'm going to think about that little concern. He told him, this hurts more than any toothache. This hurts more than any toothache. So I heard the story from somebody who heard the story from that rabbi who had this conversation with the Rebbe Rashab. And when the Rebbe told him those words, that concern hurts more than any toothache, this rabbi said, my knees were banging together with fear, because I understood what a Rebbe means. The Rebbe Rashab said the suffering that he had with his teeth was unimaginable. And he said that's the fear of that problem of the chashusha is more than any toothache. Our Rebbe didn't have teeth. My father told me that the dentist that they used, who lived next door to 770, told my father, your rabbi is a great rabbi, but if he doesn't brush his teeth, he's gonna lose them. And the Rebbe lost his teeth. The Rebbe went to the dentist to pull his teeth. The dentist once told people after Simchas Torah, the Rebbe ran to the dentist, he pulled out one tooth. He needed to pull out another tooth, he didn't have time, he went back to 770. And the dentist said, if you knew the pain that your rabbi was in with Simchas Torah, it's pain that a normal person simply cannot endure. The physical pain. Never pulled a lot of his teeth. But he let the Rashad wear dentures. That was the but the Rebbe never did. So the Frierdiker Rebbe had a bunch of sense. He told the children no dentures. That was the condition.
Mm.
So the Rashad did it for years. I'm sure he did it. At some point he was pushed so old and he needed to eat. So the Rebbe said, okay, I'll take the dentures on me. But the Rebbe that I knew had no teeth. None. And he talked normally, and he looked normal. It was an artificial effort to keep his jaw ajar 24 hours a day, because naturally the face collapsed. You know. Okay, it was one of those things that you saw by the Rebbe all the time that were supernatural, that were not physically possible, that you just took for granted. Mamish. There were things about the Rebbe, I'm not talking about miracles, ordinary physical behavioral things that are impossible to explain. Impossible. The Rebbe was 90 years old, could stand and show for 6 hours. Never needed a bathroom. Never. Stood by dollar 6-7 hours. It's not possible. A person of that age, it's not possible. The Rebbe never, ever walked out of shulchan in the bathroom at the age of 86, 87, 88. It's biologically not possible. The Rebbe was in control of his guf. The Rebbe was the master of his body, like Avraham Avinu was. Now, Avraham Avinu said that there are 5 organs over a person has no control. And he gave him the letter Hey. And when he gave him the letter Hey, he added up to 248, and the Abish that made Avraham Avinu, Balabais, all over 248. The Rebbe was the Balabas over his guf. And there were other things that you saw by them all the time. They just did on a regular basis. They would push it, not explicable. A person can do this. But the teeth will be the biggest thing. For at least 20 years, they never talked about it. At least, maybe more. And he sounded normal, a slight lisp, a slight lisp. Okay, it's all because of the Shag Yards like this tomorrow, so we just spent 10 minutes and 52 seconds after the machine went on. I started telling you the stories before. But he became Amish Chassid. When he passed away, when the Rashag passed away, obviously everyone his Lavaya. Rebbe davened the whole week of Shiva in his apartment. And the Rebbe actually went, when they put up his tombstone, the Matei, the Rebbe went, the Rebbe never went to, the Rebbe didn't go to come with him, but don't like. When they put up the tombstone for the Rebbe to Chayim Mushka, the Rebbe did not go. But for the Rashag, he went. His brother-in-law went, he showed him incredible honor. But they actually, the Rebbe said the publisher of mine 25 years ago, in 1990. Which is 25 years ago, 35 years ago, 36 years ago, passed away. They printed a minor for the yard side later in Mishmar. Okay, let's learn Sikha, yes? We're on page 141, second column by the Sikha. Now I have to frame this class, but I don't want to spend a lot of time repeating the last couple of class. I want to frame this class in a way that allows us to move forward without repeating everything that we learned. What we're discussing, you're good, you okay? Yeah. What we're discussing is the difference between Torah and mitzvahs before Hashem gave us the Torah, and Torah and mitzvahs after Hashem gave us the Torah. And one of the arguments that the Rebbe makes, it's a philosophical argument, that before Hashem gave us the Torah, Torah was one thing, and mitzvahs were a separate thing. The commandments, the things we needed to do are one thing. The ideas of the Torah, including the stories of the Torah, were separate. Once the Torah would be given, those two would become one. That's the philosophical idea. And this is the meaning of the Sefer Abris, the book of the covenant, which was written and read by Moshe Rabbeinu before the Torah was given, had two parts: the stories and the mitzvahs. Uno minuto. Yeah. So the Rebbe is explaining that because it was before the Torah was given by the Eibishter, there's a separation between the philosophical idea, the Torah part of the Torah, and the mitzvah part of the Torah. Once Hashem would give us the Torah, those two would become one. So it wouldn't only be that before Matan Torah we had less mitzvahs, and after Matan Torah we had more mitzvahs. It's a different character. Before Matan Torah, mitzvahs are separate, and Torah is separate, and after Matan Torah, Torah and mitzvahs become one and the same thing. Go ahead, you wanted to say something?
I thought last week we did 143. I have notes from 143. Yeah? Yeah.
We did all the way to 143?
Yeah. We started done. It says,
Okay, I stand corrected. I actually went just online. I looked at my computer. I must have made a mistake. Okay, so we did it already. So fine. So then I have to reset myself. I prepared the wrong.
the last thing I have is Moshe made a covenant for both separately.
Right.
Hashem came down the mountain and gave him himself. And if you understand the Torah and doing the mitzvahs as separate things, then you've missed the whole point.
Okay, so I did it. Okay, so I don't know. I listened to a class this morning. I must have made a mistake. I obviously made a mistake, but thanks for the correction. We're going to go to page 144. But so let me just continue my summary. I appreciate the fact that you're saving us a week of repetition here. I did prepare, but I prepared the wrong material. I have to look up.
Let's do it then. Maybe we'll learn something else.
Okay, I'm not going to do it, but I have to find the classes. I don't know where the classes are. Because I listened, I went to my computer and I listened. So where were the last week's classes? I must listen to 2 weeks ago classes. Okay, so let me continue this summary, okay, and repeat the point that we made last week. In general, there are philosophical ideas, and then there are behaviors that are based on those philosophical ideas. In other words, people live a certain way, people do certain things based on a certain way of thinking, based on a certain philosophy of life. That's the idea. And the argument that the Sikha makes is that normally the philosophy that underlies ideas and the behaviors that come from those ideas are very, very separate. In your head, you understand how you're supposed to live. In your body, you're supposed to do certain things to conform with the ideas that you understand in your head. But the ideas that you understand in your head are only in your head. And the things that you're doing are only with your body. One informs the other. The ideas in your brain are the basis of how you live, but they're two very, very separated things. And the classic example for this is this is not such a geschmack example, but it is a classic example of that story that the Rebbe would tell all the time about Aristotle. That Aristotle gave a class to his students on a certain concept of morality, and they didn't understand it, so they came to him to review it. When they came into his hut or wherever he lived, his tent, they found him committing the very sin that he had explained to them was immoral. He gave them a whole class on morality, and he explained to them that certain things was immoral, and then he was doing it. So they said to Aristotle, "You're the teacher, you're the master, we're only the disciples. And we would never do such an act after we heard this great discourse on this act of immorality, and here you're violating it yourself." And Aristotle answered famously, "Now I'm not Aristotle. It's the I heard that every time I explain myself. Now I'm not Aristotle." In other words, the brain can understand an enormous amount of information, but to inform the body what the brain says, it's like two steps. Understand the stuff in your head and then do it in your life. That's how things are within the parameters of the world. The whole point of Torah is that Torah is not in your head. The Torah is from the top of your head or above the top of your head to the bottom of your feet or even below the bottom of your feet. Torah encompasses all the person. So Torah speaks ideas also, but Torah informs life. You cannot think of the Torah as a book of intellectual ideas. It's not. Torah is the divine communication between God and man. Torah is the divine communication between God and man. And because it's the divine communication between God and man, it encompasses all creation. It encompasses all of man, not just the mind of man. And this is the concept that we're discussing. That before the Rebbe gave it, the Torah, that fusion did not exist yet. The ideas that I understand in my head, the sort of philosophical ideas that are the basis for how a person who follows the Torah is supposed to live his or her life. And the actions are one and the same, they're not separate. But that didn't happen until the Rebbe gave us the Torah. So Hashem gave us the Torah. But that's the significance of this book, the Sefer Abris. The book of the covenant had the stories of the Torah, had the mitzvahs of the Torah that they had. But when Moshe Rabbeinu wrote that book and read that book, it was before Mount. Okay? I thank you very much for your correction. Comments or questions? Let's go. Let's read the end of the Sikha. You know what? I sat in yeshiva today. I prepared the class, and there was a little piece of me that was afraid that I'm starting the wrong place. So I did a little looking at the Sikha we're going to learn next, but we're going to have to start today. I am sorry. I'm usually prepared. I prepared the wrong thing. Let's go. 144. Miyena shel Torah shebepirush Rashi. What would be the chassidus of this Rashi? And the Pashat the Pshat in Rashi, the simple reading of the Rashi would be that before Hashem gave us the Torah, the ideas of the Torah are one thing, the laws of the Torah are another, and after Hashem gave us the Torah, they're one and the same. I want to tell a story. Tell a story. When I started working in yeshiva, this is my 35th season that I'm working in Lubavitch yeshiva. Pretty frightening. Yeah, I've been working my whole married life. I worked in Lubavitch yeshiva in different ways and different ways. But I've been in yeshiva my whole life. So when I started working in yeshiva, there were some senior teachers who had been working in that school for many, many, many years. Some of them for 50 years, 40 years for sure. And I saw them, so to speak, at this tail end of their careers. They were already retired or semi-retired, but they were beautiful people. They were survivors of the Holocaust, many of them, who had very, very difficult personal lives, but they were beautiful Jews. They grew up in a different world. They didn't grow up in America. I love America, but America's a pretty crazy place. The upside and the downside in America is like everything else about America. It's big. Everything is big. The up is very big and the down is very big. Poland, there were poor people in Lushak, but it was very beautiful. One of these men was a person by the name of Rabbi Paltiel. By the time I got on board, he was no longer a teacher. He was no longer teaching. He was well into his 70s. But the yeshiva brought him, the principal of our school, who was a coworker of mine, around my age, had a relationship with these semi-retired rabbis, for whatever the reasons, and he brought him to yeshiva to have a tabrengen. I sat next to him, and I actually took notes. I wrote what he was saying. I forgot if I wrote at the time, or I have several pages of notes from that tabrengen that I wrote what he said. You know, when you're sitting there and listening, you think you're going to remember it forever, but those notes are close to 30 years old. If I go back to them now, when I read them, they'd be very informative. Yeah. But what he shared with us was very important to him, personally. Because he spent the war years in Shanghai, China. He was a Bach in yeshiva, he was very young, maybe 15 or 16, maybe even 14 years old. A very little boy. He was also a very reticent boy. He wasn't a confident kid, he wasn't an aggressive kid. He was very young in his whole demeanor, yeah, but he was very sincere, very chassidish. I heard from people who knew him that he was the most chassidish Bach in the whole yeshiva, the biggest tziyah, the most righteous boy in the whole yeshiva in Shanghai was him. Anyway, so what happened was, when the war started, the boys didn't know what to do. Some boys went home to their family. The boys home to their family were all wiped out. All the boys went to the Friedrich Rebbe and asked maybe what to do. The Friedrich Rebbe gave them money and said, go east. Go east. They ultimately go into Russia. They went to Vilna, which was occupied by the Russians. There was the pact that was made between the Nazis and Stalin, whatever it was called. The Ribbentrop and Molotov made a pact, and they basically divided up Poland in half. And it was Germany's way of not having to fight a war on two fronts, which ended up happening anyway. But Vilna was under the Russians. And being under the Russians was better than being under the Germans. For most Jews, it was unimaginable, but it was a fact. The Russians didn't just kill people, they they helped them die, but the Nazis just killed. So they stayed in Vilna until the Germans broke the pact, I think. And then they went east. They went through Russia, and they had these visas from this guy. What was his name? The Japanese ambassador to Vilna. Sugihara. This Sugihara saved 5,000 Jews. 5,000. At the end of the Japanese recalled, they were very angry with him. He gave a visa to anybody who wanted to go to Japan. And they never honored. So after the war was over, and the Japanese admitted that they were evil in the Second World War, Sugihara was condemned, so they died. The Japanese refused to acknowledge the righteousness of this man's act. He saved 5,000 Jews. After he died, like in 1988, so Yad Vashem made for him, you don't know what. In Israel, they gave him so much honor. But he lived in poverty his whole life. He was living in shame. He saved 5,000 Jews. After he died, the family was recognized by the Japanese. But you have to know who the 5,000 people is. The 5,000 Jews that he saved were literally all the Rosh Yeshivas of the post-Holocaust world. It was the yeshivas, it was the Midi Yeshiva, which was all the literature Rosh Yeshivas, all the non-Hasidic Rosh Yeshivas in America and in Israel. Very significant, were all the people he saved. You know what that means? He saved Torah, this one guy. And then the two other yeshivas were Hasidic yeshivas, the Lubavitcher yeshiva and the Lublin yeshiva. So Rabbi Garfinkel was a little boy. He was 14 or 15, and he was very, very undecided. Should he go home or should he go? He went to see the Friedrich Rebbe. The Friedrich Rebbe gave him 500 zlotys and told him to go east. And he listened. He didn't go home first. He didn't go home to say goodbye. He would go home to say goodbye. He'd never come back. He survived. When his friends went east, he went east with them. They helped him. He was not a very tough guy. Some of the Rockman were much older than he was. And they helped him. They had to cross borders. It was very dangerous. The plan was to get to the Dominican Republic, which was the only country in the world that was willing to take Jews. Oh, there's so much. If you want to talk about how much Goyim hate Eden, you'll never finish. We don't waste our time with it. We just try to live today and don't worry about it. But that was a story. Second World War. Nobody wanted the Jews. No one wanted the Jews. Anyway, he survived the whole Second World War. In the beginning of the war, they were actually in Japan. They were living in Kobe, Japan, which was a little bit better. You're talking now 40, 41. In December 1941, the Japanese attacked the United States. As soon as they attacked the United States, the Japanese expelled every foreign national from the out of Japan, and all the boys of all these three yeshivas who were living in Japan were put in Shanghai, which is in China, which was an international city, and life became very difficult. That's where there was hunger. People actually died from hunger in Shanghai. I think they even bombed Shanghai. He survived the whole war, running through Russia, living in Japan, living in Shanghai, and then in 1946 they came to America. The previous never was in the United States, the whole yeshiva. He said that but it took a while. The war ended in August. Right, the armistice was signed in September of 1945. The Baruch did not get here until probably March of 1946. So he told us, this Rabbi Paltiel told us, and I'm telling you his whole story to get to this point, that the first Fabrengen he attended was Purim of 1946. Who Fabrengen? The Ramash, our Rebbe, who was then called Ramash. Ramash is an abbreviation for Rebbe. Mem is his first name, Shem Shnes. Before when the previous Rebbe was alive, the Rebbe was called the Ramash. That's like the older brother one, whose yahrzeit is tomorrow, was called the Rashab, Rebbe Shmario Gadari. The Rebbe was called Ramash, the Ramash. And he Fabrengen. And this man sat at a Fabrengen 50 years later and repeated the Fabrengen. 50 years and repeated the Fabrengen. It was fattening. It went in, it was the first thing he heard, and it stayed with him. He literally repeated the Fabrengen 50 years later. What did he talk about? What did he ever talk about? Here's the part that he reviewed. He talked about the Gemara. The Gemara says, Chochma yesh b'umis tamim. If somebody says to you that amongst the nations there's Chochma, there's wisdom, there's intelligence, believe it. Torah yesh b'umas, but if somebody tells you that non-Jews have Torah, I'll come and don't believe. This was the Gemara on which the Rebbe spoke. And the Rebbe said that when it says in the Gemara, Chochma yesh b'umis tamim, that the Goyim have wisdom, believe it, that also means the Chochma of Torah. Chochma yesh b'umis, the non-Jews have wisdom, intelligence, scholarship, academia, believe it. But it means Torah, it also means Torah, because the meaning of the word Chochma throughout means Torah, and that's how the Rebbe reads the Rambam also. Torah v'Chochmasa, Chochmasa means Chochmasa Torah. So that the non-Jews have the wisdom of the Torah, believe it. But if they say to have the Torah itself, don't believe. So the Rebbe then asked the question: if the meaning of the word Chochma yesh b'umis tamim, the Goyim have Chochma means Chochma Torah. So what do you mean that they have the wisdom of the Torah, but don't have the Torah itself? So the Rebbe Fabrengen about the very same theme that we have here in the Sikh, that ideas in a brain are only in a brain. And then if you want to live your life based on those ideas, there's a separate exercise, there's a separate avodah. Okay, my brain tells me this is how I have to live. Now I have to tell my body, do what my brain says, but it's a separate thing. Hashem gave us mitzvahs, Hashem gave us Torah. Torah are the ideas that are the foundations of the mitzvahs, and the mitzvahs are the commandments. They're separate. But when the Eibusha gave us the Torah, the gift of the Torah is not an intellectual body, it's a mistake. Torah is a divine body that informs everything in the creation, including the mind and including the body of the person. When a person's brain entertains ideas as only ideas, there are significant limitations to what that brain can know because the brain is limited. Like, for example, the smartest person in the world cannot use his brain to study the heart, because the heart has different rules. It's a different system, let alone the soul, which is altogether different rules and an entirely different system. So the brain can understand brain stuff, it can understand intellectual stuff, but that's it. The Torah means something that God gave, which informs everything in the creation. It informs the mind, it informs the heart, it informs the senses, it informs the body, it informs our actions, but they're inseparable. But that idea only started when the Eibusha gave us the Torah. You listening? So ultimately, it's the same. Before Matan Torah, we had ideas. Before Matan Torah, I'm in the middle of teaching Mamish. Is it an emergency? Because I'm afraid that it's an emergency. I'll call you. Call me back after 12:30. I'm sorry. I really don't pick up the phone. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes But some people might feel like I am. Yeah.
Before Martin Torah, we had ideas.
The format, there's two separate things. There's the ideas and there's the actions, but they're separate. They're two separate systems. The event of the Abish giving us the Torah makes them into a singularity, makes them into one. So now, here's the chap. There is an advantage in them being separate. There obviously is an advantage in being one. Torah inspires my mind and my body in one event of inspiration, different thing. But there's an advantage in the contrary. What's the advantage in the contrary? That you grow into it. Like I gave you the example last week at the end of the class. I'm remembering now that Avraham Avinu became a Jew through his mind. We become a Jew through our soul. But we still have to do the mind exercise that Avraham Avinu did, because there is also an advantage of becoming a Jew through the mind. It's the same thing here. That the Torah we were given is not intellectual, it's not ritual based, it's the divine truth, which includes everything. But there's still an advantage of them being separate. Let's read, let's learn the Sikha, okay? So we're on page 144, Simches. Miyena shel Torah shel Lepirish Akiveh. The wine of the Torah. That this Rashi comes to teach. In other words, how do you see in this Rashi ideas of Pasik? And the Rebbe says the following: Afapi, even though, as Klolus Inyan Abris, that the concept of the covenant in general is the Kisher, the Chibur, the Eschabes, sufficient was an indicated that is that the covenant is binding us to Hashem and Hashem to us, right? With the two principles of the covenant. And in this case, the Ischabrus, the Isachtus, the unification, the binding and unifying from Oibishtin with God and the Jewish people is Abedor. There is, however, a difference between the bris is gemach givalon and Torah, as the covenant is made before the Torah was given, versus how the covenant was made after the Torah. 144 last paragraph, and then I've explained. Please, Matan Torah, as long as Torah is not given, it is given. There was a decree that separated. What's on high should not come lower. What's below should not go up. Right? What does that mean? Before the Abish gave us the Torah, we could learn the Abish teaching, but we could not elevate the physical world. Physical things could not become holy because they were separated from the Abish. It was a divide. When the Abish gave us the Torah, he in quote broke the decree. And in breaking the decree, when you use leather for tefillin, the parchment itself becomes holy because he broke the decree that separated heaven and earth. Kumtaitza comes out. Any covenant like this one, which was made before the Torah is given, is the Alzgeven Verbundet. It's only connected with them governor to the person, nit with them hefs. The human being through Torah can become better, but his physical wealth, his physical possessions cannot. The Yeseidim is there, moreover, in addition to this first limitation, that before the Abish gave us the Torah can make us better, but it's not going to make the world better. There's another thing, and that is as it is true that Durach Torah mitzvah listening about the Torah, when he did learn Torah, he did mitzvah before the Torah was given. There was an aliyah. It did affect that the person should become better. When Achidu is an Abish, it actually helped the person become connected to Hashem.
What the point that you're saying that?
Let me just finish, please. Thus, it's aber given in an infant for farmat and Torah. It was limited to the extent to which a person, the Abish as the pre-Matan Torah world provided for. In other words, top of 145 now, even the idea that we could become one with Hashem, it didn't make us one with Hashem and make us into the divine. It made us one with Hashem to the extent that a creation to come one with Hashem, and no more. Go ahead. Oh.
So this was before. There was no ways. You're saying before there was no way for it to affect our gashmis by doing
Correct.
our physical body, but now it can.
Yeah. Not just our body, our wealth. Not just our body, our wealth. However, Let's look at the next paragraph. Says Dar Ba'adan Eloi, there is on the other hand an advantage, as the bris is given from Farman, that there is an advantage to the fact that the covenant happened on a lower level. In other words, David could have waited. Moshe could have waited. He could have brought this carbon, and I'm going to say something really bad because I told you I wouldn't say it. Like that Ramban holds, Nachmanides holds. He holds that the conversion after that was given. And now you understand why. I mean, his reasoning is because he's very, very reluctant to invoke the idea that the Torah is not written in chronological order. And since the conversion event is written in the next parasha, he knows that happened after. After the Abishai gave us the Torah, before Moshe went up on the mountain for the 40 days, he converted us. But the Rashi doesn't hold that. The Rashi holds the conversion happened before. It says that there's an advantage in the conversion happening before. As the bris is given, Farmatan Torah, there's an advantage in the covenant happening before the Torah was given. Yes, because Azayin Oich Demo, the fact that we as Jews were even then, parenthesis, Farmatan, Hashem had not yet given us the Torah, and still we were. Shurim, Anuvim, and Tfusim. These are three expressions in the Medrash. Tied, interwoven, and in the grip of. Three expressions. Shurim means tied to the Torah. Anuvim means mixed together. Or Anuvim actually means bowed, like a bow. And Tfusim, grasp. Midbechinas, I tell you, with that level of the Torah. That was on the level of people, and it was far matan Torah Hashem gave us the Torah. Moreover, we were connected to that level of godliness, which was limited to what the world can hold. So it was a lower covenant. We were only connecting to Hashem in a limited way. Says the Rebbe, it's understood. As when a person first connects to Hashem on the basis of his own limitations, is there zichach b'aliyas hanevrayim, when later Hashem gives us the Torah, and He raises us to an even higher level. By Matan Torah, when He gave us the Torah, given Nachmei B'Shleimus was more perfect and it was more whole and it was more peaceful. Therefore, Zayin say given mitzad madrei gosam, the Jews, because of their own level, then given roy makabel on the Torah, they were then fit to receive the Torah. Shalomayim and get the nevrayim over the category of the creation. The Rebbe is giving us a common sense argument. And the common sense argument has to do with what ultimately is going to become a logical challenge. And that is, how does a person prepare to become close to God? How does a person prepare to, how do you approach God? How do you approach God? If you think you can approach God, you don't know what God is. If you know what God is, you understand you can't approach Him. So how do you approach God? How did that happen? What's the answer? What's the answer? Nobody even wants to guess. I'm asking a question. How does a human being approach God?
Touch in yourself, like in the public.
Starting within yourself.
It's a nice answer, but it's not the answer I'm looking for.
Which one?
You tried, yes, you did. You took a risk. Appreciate it. What's the answer? The answer is God approaches you. That's how you approach it.
It was a trick question.
Fine. I am sorry for being tricky, but the best I have. I just thought you should be able to think about it because we talked about it so much. But okay, it's fine. You can't approach God, but God can approach you. And if God approaches you, and as a consequence of God approaching you, then approach Him, you can have a relationship with Him. The reason you can have a relationship with Him is because He's creating the terms. But the fact that He's creating the terms means what? The fact that we're approaching Him based on His terms means we really are not there. We're not there because we deserve to be. We're not there because we earned to be. We're not there because we made the steps to get us there. He just gave us the connection. And that's really true. It really is true. He gave us the connection. And you could even say this about non-Jews who keep the 7 mitzvahs of Noach, that they're being involved with Hashem because the Mitzvah Mitznech also is not because of their own effort. It's because Hashem gave them the mitzvahs, and giving them the mitzvahs, gave them the opportunity to come close to Him and so on. Okay? So the Rebbe says, there is something to be said about going through the steps. Something to be said about going through the steps. Although the earlier steps are lower and the higher steps are higher later, but going through the steps affects that by going through the steps, you're to whatever extent possible earning the relationship. If you don't go through the steps, Hashem can do whatever he wants. But if you go through the steps of trying to approach God to the best of your limited abilities, so because you made that effort of coming close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though in the end your closest with the Eibush is not defined by you, it's defined by him. But because you made whatever effort you could make to approach him, that approach is much more connected to your personhood, to your humanity than it would be otherwise. And therefore the Eibush makes the covenant before he gives us the Torah. And when he makes the covenant before he gives us the Torah, they're distinctly two separate concepts. The Torah and the mitzvahs. Now, of course, that's going to change when Hashem gives us the Torah. Nevertheless, there's a reason to go through that step. The reason to go through that step is that even though finally, ultimately, the Eibush is the one creating the relationship, but by making it in steps, we have some capacity to deserve the relationship, we have some capacity to approach him and be a partner in the relationship itself. So the Rebbe says that's the advantage of the covenant of the bris being made before Matan Torah. It's a human covenant made by human people on human levels to bind themselves to the Eibush. And then afterwards, Hashem would give us what is transcendent of that, a connection to him that he's giving us. Questions or comments? Oh, let's finish, okay? L'das Rashi, page 145, second column. According to Rashi, Zayin in the Vayichte, when it says in the Chumash that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the book of the covenant, and in the bris, and in reading that covenant, Yevent Svei in Yod, the two separate things, Teda and Mitzvah. The Teda is the intellectual ideas of the book, and Mitzvah, the behavioral ideas of the book, and they're separate. People, as far as people are concerned, as we are creations, ideas and behaviors that come from those ideas are separate concepts. The Jewish people take that type. There's Nashe Badud or Nishma Badud. We accept to do the mitzvahs as one thing. We choose to listen and understand the Torah as a separate thing because they were two separated things. All but as far as Hashem is concerned, that division is not noticed. The Eibush is active as Hashem is one. As a doctor, the Torah expresses that unity in the Torah itself. Alice is in or one idea of the Torah, and therefore the notion of separating the Torah into the ideas and the behavior stops when the Eibush gives it. Go ahead.
You're talking about like the advantage of the steps. You mean like the step? What are the steps? The steps are before Matan Torah.
Versus after Matan Torah. Yeah. Now, since we're Americans, our favorite word is fairness. And our most evil and sinful world is a lack of fairness, okay? So here's where it becomes not fair. It becomes not fair if you're born the next generation, or two generations, later, three. You didn't get the opportunity to choose it. You didn't get the opportunity to go into it. You were born into it. So the Rebbe says in Adar, the Sikha, you're born into it, go back and make it your own. Go back and choose it. Go back and make it personal. It's the biggest challenge of being an FFP, being going from. It's a real challenge, and the kids struggle with it. Their parents, in many cases, about their children, they make fun of their parents, that they speak people with an English accent, not words. But their parents are tzaddikim. And then what do the kids say to their parents? You chose it, I was born into it. You made this selection, you elected to be a from Jew, I was born into it. And what's the answer to that? The quick answer to that is number one. Every Jew is born to be Jewish at the different Eibush that I've seen it. And number two, you have to earn, you have to make it your own to the extent that you can. Yeah, you're born into it, now you have to personalize. Here's another sikha that speaks of this concept as well. We'll stop. Come back in 5, okay? And I'm gonna ask someone to make the copies in the next class. I don't know how I made this mistake, because I went and I looked. I reserve the right to remake these copies next week. I already marked them, but I'm gonna have to mark them again. I didn't realize that I need this class for today.
If someone's willing to record the classroom today, I have to go to a virtual interview right now.
Every
Would you mind?
you recorded your whole website. You probably could listen to it. I'm gonna edit and post, it'll be a while, but it stays up a little bit till we. I don't take it down. In other words, these classes stay for 24 hours after I leave them. This is the copy that this here that I need.
Your website?
If you go to Facebook or YouTube,
Okay.
and you go to my page, you'll find these classes up for about 24 hours, and then they take them down.
Okay.
And then they repost again. But Machon, I think, leaves them up forever. Ask the girl downstairs, Namda, where these classes go. And you can find it. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Thank you.
See this, it's called mudgets. Have you ever heard of mudgets?
Yes,
Yeah, you have?
from you. I don't remember how, but that was.
Mudgets sing. They sing, they sing, they sing. Did I give someone a copy of this either? I did, yeah, I get to make the copy. Did I give someone to make the next either or not?
I'm writing Leah on there so that you know it belongs to me.
It's a good idea. You can write that in your meeting. I'll know it's you. So they sing, the whole Chassidus is singing, and I have a son who's an incredibly gifted young man. He just very cosmopolitan, and his brain is big enough to know everything about everybody. He knows history. He traveled all over Europe and he visited places,
That's so cool.
yeah, and he's just interesting boy.
Guess what? Guess where I'm trying to go for the trip?
Where?
California.
What's in California?
Laguna Niguel.
Oh, my son is there.
Yeah.
My niece, Leia. Wow, you're really close to her.
I really want to go see them.
Very cool. Anyway, so my son, he somehow has access to it. So I found whatever it is, recordings of like a Mojitza Fabrenian. All they do is sing for hours.
That's so fun.
They just sing and sing and sing. So some of the Negunim are very famous, and everybody knows them. Everybody sings them. And then most of the Negunim are like, what? I never heard that.
Did you just restart the class?
No. I just prevented the screen from going blank. Rivka, I apologize for forgetting your name.
Rabbi Paltiel, is the other okay?
Say that again.
Is the other okay?
How do you know what's going on? My daughter.
I was just figuring out, is this your okay?
Which daughter?
Is it your daughter?
That what?
When's the ODA?
You work in the ODA, you saw us.
Yeah. no,
It means
no,
Hashem should be okay. We don't know
I'll tell you.
exactly what's going on, but yes. It's Shem. I got on a
Finish
plane. Went on a plane, I flew to North Carolina, I go home. But I haven't, but everyone's got stuff. She'll be okay with this. Yeah. When she gets sick, she gets really sick. It's more, yeah, makes the show. Anyway, so it's one of the Nagun that the first nigga that they sing, I know. So in my head, it's playing.
That's so exciting.
Hi, it's so sweet, it's so beautiful. And then I already watched videos of the current Mojit Tzedevit. There's a Mojit Chassidus. So there's like a dynasty. Thank you very much. So I'm sure in Europe, it was bigger and it was more people, and it was more dynamic. After the Holocaust, everything in most Hasidic groups, smaller, But they have a following in America and in Israel. They're famous.
Where do they
Yes.
live?
In some place that's so, it's probably more than one place. There's a famous singer named Benzion Shanker. You know Benzion Shanker? He composed Eishes Chayil Yimtza, Marle David, da 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 da. This is Muddy. Da da da. He composed many in the good. So the whole Mudget is about singing. The whole Mudget is about singing.
This is for next week.
For now, we have 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
We just finished it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
We have with you another day in a week. or-
once a week, just Wednesdays,
Ah, okay.
just once a week.
In my last week here.
Ah, you came for 2 weeks. Okay.
No. I came
A month?
month and 1 week, but here in the second level 2 weeks.
Right, I understand. Okay, so you can take me home with you.
He's gonna give you some, I'm sure.
This is my website. This.
Perfect. I think you gave it to me the other time, but I forget them.
So now you have it again.
You know, I found some of your Pesach cleaning.
Say that
You
again.
are a YouTuber. I found some of your cards from your Pesach cleaning from your business cards. Okay,
That's so funny.
people were using them as bookmarks.
What are they? Bookmarks. Okay, whatever it is. You come out.
You have a video for
Oh,
here.
Yeah, it's a very, it's an archive. It's 14,000 classes. It's 20 years of work. The last 3 years of video. Yeah,
Wow.
it's what I do.
And why you have two phones? One,
This is a recorder and this is a broadcast. This is live.
no, and that's not the phone, that's the.
This is my phone, yeah.
But
They don't belong to me. They're inside citizens phone.
this is from who?
In my organization.
Ah,
Inside
okay.
Hasidus, yeah. So why, I was talking about budget. Oh, so I saw this Fabrengi with the Mudget and Rebbe sitting after Yom Kippur. The night after Yom Kippur, they finished fasting and the Chavah city, they're still wearing their kitlach. Some of them wear the talaisim. And they're singing. And the Mudget Rebbe, I'm sure he's a wonderful Jew, but I'm sure his ancestors who lived 150 years ago were on a higher level than he is, you know. And they're just singing. They're singing together. They harmonize.
That's so fun.
It's so interesting. But it's a central pillar of their chassidus. It's a central pillar of their chassidus. And when you watch them, you understand how different Chabad is. Chabad chassidus is very hard. You know why? A lot is expected. A lot is not given like. Well, ultimately, like you have to choose how you're going to serve. What are you going to do with your life that's going to make the world a better place? It's a foundational part of Chabad today. That's not how they live. They live in small communities together. They know they do what they do. And the Chassidus warms them and lifts them up. Interesting. But it's beautiful. It actually is very beautiful. And as a child, when I was a kid in Crown Heights, so we did not daven in 770. We did not daven in 770 because the Rebbe did not want us to daven in 770. The Rebbe wanted us to support the local shuls because the community was falling apart. Everyone was running away. And the Rebbe wanted to save the community. So we all stayed davening near our homes. I'll tell you pleasantness. Every morning, one of my students picks me up and drives me to yeshiva. We go up Troy Avenue. And we pass a building, which is now a church. That I remember being the shul. My father remembers 100 churches being shuls. I remember only one. All over Crown Heights, the entire Eastern Parkway, from the Interborough, from what they call now the Jacket Brothers. You travel along Eastern Parkway, there's big, beautiful churches. They were all shuls with Magen Davids. Those beautiful painted stained windows with the Slavists there. We weren't shuls. My father will tell you who was the rabbi. You understand? But I had this one shul, so we had to say that we davened in the local shul. But then there were in those local shuls, there were many of these other groups, Chassidish groups. The older ones, the parents were clean shaven. They were Holocaust survivors, clean shaven, did not wear kapatos, they wore gadlach. Their children already had beard, their children were in yeshiva, their children put on steinlach. that generation, the way I remember it is, when your first son got married, you put him at kaput. When your second son got married, you started growing your beard. And when your third son got married, you put on a shтай. I watch these survivors. We don't understand what survivors means. They would argue, they would scream at each other, but every stupid thing. As a kid, I grew up thinking that it's normal for people to scream at each other. Really? They would scream about the silliest things, like someone took someone's chair, or they would argue about a story. They would get angry, they would scream, they would get angry, they were very nervous. It took me many, many years to understand that these people were plain, simple, not normal. They all got married, they all had children, but they were survivors. And all that, they were just very nervous people, incredibly nervous people. And but they sang. Oh, they sang. And when they sang, there was an old man in one of those shuls, whose name I don't remember anymore. He sat at the head of the table in a little chair, a little broken little chair. And he had a very soft voice. When he would start to sing, he would get quiet. Because he sang these. He would sing, and then they would say, "You have to go to the Yom." No, I'm not going to do it. What was his name? He used to know these people's names. I'm talking 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. Now there's a new world. It's beautiful, it's rich, it's peaceful, it's safe. But it's so messed up. It really is. Everything. We have all this wealth, we have all this freedom, and we're so crazy. Because our life is controlled by technology, by noise, distraction. We have to create a noun that means being split into 1,000 pieces. Splitness, think of a word. But you know what it means, a human being who's every minute of his life is in 5 places. They were not that way, they moved slowly, they did one thing at a time. They were not in a rush. You live in a shtetl, you moved at the pace of a horse and wagon, and we moved the plane of a rocket. Not an airplane, a rocket. And we're split. We talk to a person and you feel like half of them is listening, the other half is someplace else. They're split. This is our world. Anyway, I have to start the next season. We don't have that much time, which is good by me because I'm not really prepared. I made a mistake. I can't believe it. I prepared the class. I prepared the wrong week. So I must have displaced the 2 classes from last week. Because online, the last class I gave you was the one I was about to, I think you put the rest. Okay, no, this is a new sikha. We don't have much time, but we'll start. Okay? It's an interesting sikha because it speaks to a detail of the story. But like everything else that it ever touches, this little detail is going to become a whole world. It's going to become a whole world. What's the best way for me to introduce this sikha? This is, I believe, our 5th sikha, 5th group of classes, or what we're calling the 5th day. Friday, the 6th of Sivan, is the eve of the giving of the Torah. On that day, the Jewish people, of course, were preparing themselves to get the Torah, the 48 hours for which to become prophets. I told you 101 times. And a lot of things happen. The trademark of those lot of things that happened that day is that on the one hand, they're preparing us to get the Torah. We were converted. We had a book of the covenant. But on the other hand, somehow they're what you would call one-time events. They happen once and they're never going to happen again. Moshe was getting the Jewish people to receive the Torah. Once the Torah would be given, the realities would change, the terms would change, the facts on the ground would be different. But these events are written in the Torah, even though they're one-time events. In other words, most of the Chumash informs our life directly. Most of the Chumash teaches us things that we need to know today. Some of the Chumash is story. The stories of the Chumash are events that happened a long time ago. Stories of the Chumash that happened a long time ago are not happening now. They happened then. But they're important enough to be in the Torah, even though they're events that happen only once. Somehow those events inform our lives as well. And they're different. They're different. Like I mentioned to you, the Rebbe has a sikha. The Rebbe actually asks the question. The story of Abraham and Sarah is irrelevant to us because we live a different kind of life than they do. The story of Yitzchak and Rivka is irrelevant to us because they live a different type of life that we live. And the same is true with Yaakov and Sarah and Rachel and Leah. And the Rebbe's question is, why is this story told to us? The Chumash is irrelevant, and the answer is because it's a lesson for us. The same is true with the whole conversion thing, and with all the details that we discussed in the last several classes about the limitations of that conversion, because the title was not completely the Jewish people, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, these stories are written in the Chumash, because even though they happen once, and the way they happened no longer exists for the Jewish people because we live a very different kind of religious life, these stories somehow inform us nevertheless. Okay? So now let's learn the Sikh. Yeah, I gotta say l'chaim, I gotta drink my poison. Okay, page 15, you with me?
Yeah.
The Gemara. In the Sugya of Matan Torah, the Gemara, which is a tractate Shabbos, that tells the entire story of the Jewish people receiving the Torah. And I just want to throw this in for fun, right? Every mitzvah in the Torah has a Gemara that speaks to it, right? Rosh Hashanah speaks about Rosh Hashanah. Yoima or Yuma speaks about Yom Kippur, right? Masechta Sukkah speaks about Sukkah. Masechta Pesachim speaks about Pesach, right? Masechta Megillah speaks about Purim. Now the two Yom Tov that do not have holidays are Purim, are Chanukah, and Shavuos. Chanukah does not have a Gemara of its own for whatever reasons. Shavuos does not have a holiday of its own because there's no real special mitzvahs on Shavuos. A lot of people say that Shavuos is connected to Masechta Beya, the Beitzah, which means literally the egg. Because those are the halachas of Yom Tov, the laws of Yom Tov. The laws of Yom Tov apply to Pesach, Sukkot, and as well as Shavuos. But some people say on Shavuos, live Masechta Beitzah because it's the only Masechta which deals with Shavuos. But the details that are unique to Matan Torah are in other places in Shas, in other places in the Gemara. So where do you have the entire discussion about the story that Hashem is giving us the Torah? It's in Masechta Shabbos, in the tractate Shabbos, partially because the Torah was given on Shabbos, and there are other reasons as well. But partially is because there's simply no Masechta Shavuos. There is no tractate that speaks to Shavuos, right? The laws of Sfiras Omer, for example, right? Are Hilchos Pesach. So you start saying it on Pesach, right? But there's no Masechta Shavuos. So in Masechta Shabbos, you have the story of Matan Torah. So the Gemara in this sugya from Matan Torah is of the Gemara. When discussing the story of Hashem giving us the Torah, which goes on for like 4 or 5 pages, it says, V'sheni b'Sivan, the second day of Sivan, which was a Tuesday, all of Moshe, the Yarad Moshe went up and he came down. Right? What happened on that day? He went up and he was given the contract. I'm offering you that you're going to be a segula, a precious treasure, and Mamlachas Kain a gay Kaddish, a kingdom of priests and the holy people. And I'm demanding for you 2 things. Im Shemayu Tishbo Kaili, you're going to listen to what I'm telling you and you're going to do what I say. So it was a contract. Hashem is offering something and he's demanding something. Bishlishi Alavayada, the next day, which was on a Wednesday, the 3rd of Sivan, again he went up and he went down. What happened on that day? Moshe went up and he told the Jewish people, he told God, that the Jewish people agreed to the contract. So Hashem said, okay, go back down and tell the people, mitzvah sagabala, we're going to make a fence, they're going to be outside, you're going to be inside, I'm going to talk only to you. I'm going to talk only to you, they're not going to experience my presence, they're simply going to be witnesses that I'm talking to you, and it'll be advantageous to you. That was on Wednesday, which was the 3rd of Sivan, yeah. But Avi, Allah Aviyada. on the fourth day, which was on a Thursday, he went back up. And what did he tell the Eibishter now, remember?
Just wants to be-
That the Jews don't like the terms. No lawyers. The contract is gonna be signed by the principals, no sas. Ein yedeme. Hashemei mepi hashliach. Lemisha shemeya. From the Eibishter himself. It's not, you can't compare hearing it from the representative of the Eibishter, from hearing the Eibishter himself. We want, it's an Einu, Linus, that's Malkein, we want to meet the Eibishter. And now goes I have my excuse to repeat my favorite cliche, this particular moment. Moses thought it was a great idea. God thought it was a terrible idea. And the Jewish people had no idea what they were getting themselves into. By the way, this doesn't say in any book. I sort of made this up. This is my drama, you know. The story becomes, it grows a beard and pays without the socks and shoes and boots at this point. The story becomes bigger and more dramatic as I tell it, right? The Yidden want to become the V'im. To be a Navi is a lifetime of Pnishus. They had 48 hours. That was negotiated on Thursday. Moshe came up the mountain all excited. If the Jews don't want to have any lawyers, they want to speak to Abish directly. And Hashem says, Moshe, you know what's going to happen? If every Joe Schmo experiences prophecy, it's going to be really bad. The Moshe is going to be wonderful. They'll become the Nevi'im. Yeah, but Moshe, think what's going to happen afterwards. But they'll become the Nevi'im. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Vilsky, you want to go with your plan? And of course, 2 days later, Moshe had to come back to the Abish and say, let's go back to the first plan. But this is what happened on Thursday. So every day, beginning with Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Moshe went up the mountain in the morning. He gave a message and he took a message and they were preparing to get the table. What about Friday? B'chamisha, the fifth day, Bonam Mizbeach, he built an altar. As the pasuk says, V'yivim Mizbeach Tachas Ahari, he built an altar underneath the mountain, Rashi. The Hikin of Allah, carbon, he brought on this Mizbeach and carbon. Now, Goyos, listen to me very, very carefully. The Rebbe's Ein HaBoichem, the Rebbe's incredibly discerning eye, doesn't even know that there's such a thing as a box that you're supposed to think outside of. No, there's something thinking inside the box, thinking outside the box. The Rebbe never knew what the box. The Rebbe looks at the Torah, he reads it as it's written, and he always sees things that other people don't see. It's a discrimination. He sees things that nobody else doesn't see because he doesn't make the mistake of assuming. He never makes the mistake of presupposing. It probably means, there's no probably. What does it say? Now we know because we learned several sichos on it, that part of the story of that day, Friday, the 6th of Sivan Friday, the 5th of Sivan was that the Jews were converted, and part of the conversion was they brought Kabbalah, right?
No.
Huh? In Zman HaGoz, he can't bring a carbon. They brought Kabbalah. Moshe brought Kabbalah on that. The Gemara says on Friday, Moshe Rabbeinu brought a carbon, built a mizbeach, and he brought a carbon. This is the Gemara says. So we all assume that we presuppose that the mizbeach Moshe built and the carbon Moshe offered up is the same carbon which we read about in our earlier classes that converted the Jewish people. And the Rebbe is going to say, wait a second. If the Gemara means that carbon that we brought, the Moshe Rabbeinu brought on behalf of us for our conversion, it should also say, and the Jews said, Nasa v'nishma, they read the Sefer Abrid. It says one thing. Moshe did not go up to Hashem because he built a mizbeach and he brought a carbon. So then they immediately said that this Gemara is not talking about the same carbon that we don't. And it's the Rebbe's clarity not to be lazy and assume what seems commonsensical and say, no, wait a minute. Look at the words. Look at the words. So I'm going to ask you a favor, but I'm not going to bother you. You have this? Take it out quickly. Take it out. Friday, second page. You have it?
Yeah.
Friday, 5th of Sivan, 2448, the collective conversion of Jewish people. Friday morning. He brings a mizbeach onto the altar. Near the altar, there's 12 monuments. The Shteim Asar, Shiftei Yisrael to the 12 tribes of Israel. Yishlach is not even a he sent the youth of the Jewish people, which means the firstborn, who were then the Kayanim. But Yalu Oiles, they offered up carbonates which were completely consumed by the Beach. By Yizbuch was Rachem Shom, they brought carbonates which were eaten by the people and by God and by the priests, by the flooding of peace offerings. Lashem to the plunder all ox, cow. And then he took half of the blood, he put them into buckets, the other half he put on the Mizbeach, and so on and so on. Now we all assume that the Mizbeach in Pasuk Dalet and the carbonates in Pasuk here, the same carbonates. Moshe built a Mizbeach, and he called the young Chavre, who were then the Kohanim, the Kohanim were the Kohanim until the original son of Eden, they just take that out, and they brought carbonates. But the Rebbe says that the Gemara is saying that the two separate things going on. Moshe built the Mizbeach himself, and brought carbonates himself. Stop. Then there were other carbonates brought by the Nari B'nai Yisrael. You look at the language of the Gemara without any presupposition. Look at the language of the Gemara. V'chamishi, the last two lines of the first paragraph of this Sikha. V'chamishi bonu Mizbeach, on the fifth day, which was Friday, built the Mizbeach. To the exhibit, the Pasuk says, the Yidin Mizbeach, Tachas built the Mizbeach. The Hikid of Allah, carbon to carbon. Now, the Rebbe is going to argue that this carbon is a separate carbon from the carbon that the Kayanim brought to facilitate the conversion of the Jewish people. You understand? That's the point of this Sikha. The Rebbe learns the Pasuk in Chumash and just doesn't decide that it means this because it makes sense. He looks at the words very precisely. Like I said to you before, the Rebbe doesn't even know there's in the box. He's supposed to think outside of. He doesn't have any box. He just sees everything. Well, that means the class is over, right? I'm going to read 2 minutes, I'm going to let you go, okay? I'm going to read 2 more minutes, I'm going to let you go. And next week, I'm going to start again, but I feel very bad that I came unprepared. The class is a big sin. Page 15, bottom of the first column. The Tirde for Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe was very, very preoccupied. Tirde means the emotional fatigue. That's the term the word Tirde. That Moshe Rabbeinu had. B'chemishi b'Sivan, on this Friday, the 5th of Sivan. To livelche Moshe Rabbeinu hat nicht oile gewen lahat. It consumed Moshe Rabbeinu so much that it prevented him from going up the mountain that day. Even though every other day Moshe went up the mountain. Tuesday morning he went up the mountain. Wednesday morning he went up the mountain. Thursday morning he went up the mountain. Friday morning he didn't go the mountain because he was preoccupied. Why? Because he brought a carbon on his back. Because the Rebbe had the Torah described, the Gemara described, that on Friday Moshe did not go up the mountain because he was busy. The first thing that should describe the Indian for Knisas B'nai Yisrael B'Bris. We know from the last 3 sikhs that we just learned that on that Friday Moshe was converting the Jewish people. So the Gemara wants to explain that Moshe was so busy that he couldn't go up to the top of the mountain on that day because he was so busy. What should they describe? He collected the entire nation of Israel, several million people, and he mass converted them to Torah through mikveh, and through carbon, and through Kabbalah Samitzvah to Nasa and Ishma. The Gemara should have said that Moshe did not go up the mountain because he was busy converting the Jewish people. But it's the most important thing in the Achonis for the Kabbalah that prepares to receive the Torah. But the Gemara doesn't say it. The Gemara simply says Moshe built a Mizbeach and he put carbonis on it. What about the converting of the Jewish people? Why is that mentioned? Bottom of the page 15, second column, is the full matter of proof. Adar Chiddush Gadol, and this incredibly novel thought. As mit v'hishta love carbon. When the Gemara said that Moshe did not go up the mountain because he brought a carbon, main the Gemara's intention is nit the carbonis, not those sacrifices. And befedish and pasuk that are written later in the pasuk as part of the conversion ritual. They were oilers and shlomim. Nor, but rather as Meisha Lane of Makav Deves Navagunda and carbon Meisha offered up a different sacrifice. Nicht and pasuk was not recording in the pasuk. The big Kiddush. But since the Gemara singled out the African carbon without specifying that the carbon of the Jewish people or anything like that, it proved that the carbon that we're talking about is a very different carbon from the carbon that was brought to convert the Jewish people. And that's the question of the Sikh. What carbon are we talking about? Questions or comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember, I would say like we learned a lot of the conversion from the story, even though like,
It was different than ours.
yeah. You say it was incomplete or incomplete? Oh, because not gonna mention that in the main part of it. Okay.
No, they can't bring a korban.
Oh, there could be, in times of Golos, we can't bring a carbon.
Yeah,
It's
ours.
so interesting. One of the things that I did this morning was I post these classes. So Yochel edits and she's doing an amazing job. And she sends them back to me and I post and I have to annotate them. I write summaries. So sometimes I'm writing a summary 3 months after I gave the class and it's very hard for me to remember. One of the things I did this morning was summarize those classes to which you're speaking right now. We were missing the carbon in
We're
times of
missing,
Golos,
yeah.
but they had the carbon. What they were missing was the Teda. They didn't have the whole Teda.
Okay, yeah.
And because they didn't have the Teda, they gave them a piece for them. I will see you in a week.
Can you also make more copies for, in case nobody will come to class? Unless you have them.
I'll do it next week.
What about the the assurance.
Those are carbonas of Gators.
Right, so you saying there's.
But the carbon that the Tater says, as your mother says, Moshe did not go up the mountain because he was very busy. Because he built them his back and brought a carbon, it's not the same carbon.
He gave another.
The difference is, he brought that himself. The Shlomim and the Podim were not brought by Moshe Rabbeinu, they were brought by the, not even a soul, by the other claim, by the first brewing.
What do we do with the seed of, that we didn't annotate?
The old one or the new one,
Okay.
you can put it in Sheamus. It would be a shame to put in Sheamus, you could save it, but you can.
I have it, no, I have it on my tablet.
Okay, good for you.
Then why am I copying this one for you?